Greetings, parish orphans and retrogrades. Welcome back to Rules for Retrogrades. Aside from a weekend show where I announced C-Mask, a new side podcast I'm doing on this channel and on others, this is my first show back in almost 2 weeks. Had a 1.5 week period layoff, and lots of news came your way in that period. Today's bit of news remains news because it happened just a day ago, and it will help me to sum up some of the things that happened in this 1.5 week period layoff. So welcome back to Rules for Retrogrades. The Pope has extended the reform process of the 2-year synodality synod for 1 year. And it looks like it might actually be a little more than a year, amid apathy and criticism. I repeat, the Pope has extended the reform process for a year amid apathy and criticism. A few things ought to leap out of this headline right at your brain. Number one, the reform process. This is an AP article, Associated Press, the secular news king, calling the synodality synod process, I think accurately, reform process. What do they know that my faithful Pope-splaining friends in Christendom don't know? Because they get it. This is a reform process. This is, if I can use the term pejoratively, Vatican III. I think a proper Vatican III would correct issues with Vatican I and Vatican II or ambiguities. It would be a good thing. But this is Vatican III, if Vatican III were a radical extension of the spirit of Vatican II. So that's issue number one that we're going to talk about today. How do they know it's a reform process? And number two, what does it mean that the synodality synod needed to be extended because of apathy and criticism? What could that possibly mean? I mean, there's been apathy in the church for 2,000 years. There's been intra-Christian criticism within the church for 2 millennia. So why in the heck would Pope Francis stall? Those are the two themes that are going to run throughout today's program. How does AP know that this synod is about reform? And why would criticism or apathy stop the Pope and his folks from doing what they need to do, God's work, via synodality? I have what I think are the answers for you today. I can form a reasonable theory to the facts, and that's what I'm going to do in just a second. Patrons of mine who support Timothy J. Gordon on Patreon, thank you. You are in many ways the lifeblood of this channel. You keep the show going. Those of you out there who want to become a patron of mine today, who aren't yet, go to Timothy J. Gordon at Patreon. This month, starting on Friday, we have an exciting new Patreon activity to do together. On Friday and on the next 4 Fridays, we will be getting together live between now, mid-October and mid-November, starting in the spirit of Halloween, to watch the most Aristotelian Thomist season of any program which has aired on TV in the last 10 years at least. And it's one of the best things I've ever seen. Season 1 of Stranger Things, it's partly in honor of the Hallowtide, the 3-day Christian celebration of the dead saints, the victorious dead, beginning with Halloween. One of our favorite holidays here in the Gordon household. We are going to watch for Friday, beginning at 5:15 Central Standard Time on Friday. We are going to all have watched the first episode of Stranger Things Season 1. And after that, we're going to watch about 2 episodes per week. And I'm going to break it down and discuss it with you to show you, even though it's Netflix, which is evil, even though the writers of the shows have gone woke, Season 1 of Stranger Things is a beautiful, beautiful crypto-Christian thing. Become a patron today, timothyjgordon.com. Also, go to realestateforlife.org and get out of your blue state, get to a red state today. It's a good Christian, probably a Catholic pro-lifer on the other end of the line, at realestateforlife.org. You got a couple months till the midterm election, a month and a half now. Get out of your blue state, get to a red state today. realestateforlife.org will help you. All right, what do we have before us when we talk about the year? Well, really, it's a 2.5 year long process already. A synod that lasts 2 to 2.5 years from 2021 to 2023. That's really long. The Pope has recently announced just yesterday that this isn't a long enough period of time to accomplish what he wants to accomplish with this synodality synod. The outright death blow to the church is what Pope Francis is trying to accomplish with the synodality synod. That's what he had planned. And I'm going to review how he's used synodality and synods, broadly speaking, throughout his pontificate to radicalize the church, to issue the death blow to the traditional church. That just means the Roman Catholic Church. He announced it yesterday. He blessed the faithful from his studio's window overlooking St. Peter's Square on the occasion of the Angelus noon prayer at the Vatican yesterday, October the 16th at noon. And there he announced he's decided, according to the AP, to extend by a year a lengthy global consultation of ordinary Catholics about the future of the Catholic Church, amid limited participation by the laity and seeming resistance to his reforms from the hierarchy. That's the first paragraph of this AP story. Secular press king, the Associated Press. And somehow, these guys at AP, in one short paragraph, already have evinced that they have a better clue, a shrewder view into what's really happening at the synodality synod than half of all the Pope-splainers out there in Roman Catholicism, in Catholic land. And the Catholics obviously are smart guys. They know more about Francis. They know more about the magisterium. They know more about the church. So why does the AP have a leg up on understanding what's really happening here? Well, it's willful blindness on the part of the Pope-splainers, of course. But remember, those two themes that we're going to talk about today. Number one, how does the AP understand so confidently that the synodality synod is all about reform? And number two, why would apathy and criticism on the part of Catholics stall Francis from what he's trying to do? He's faced apathy and criticism at every step along the way from people like me. I mean, not apathy, more criticism. But he's faced unwillingness to follow him at every step along the way from folks like me. And there are a lot of folks like me from all of the Catholic YouTube channels that are, center right to very right. And this has never stopped him before. So question number two is, why would it matter? I think I have a theory that can explain both of these two aporia. Aristotle calls vexing, seeming puzzles of questions aporia, and that's what we're going to do today. Francis announced Sunday that the planned 2023 gathering of bishops would now take place in two stages. One session in October 2023 and a second in October 2024 to allow more time to find a way forward. So this is, by my estimation, if I have this wrong, somebody correct me. This is more than tacking on a year, by the way. By my count, we were supposed to be rounding to the third phase of the synod by late spring of 2023. He not only added in a full year to spring of 2024, but he's saying it's not going to be until October of 2024 to, quote, allow more time to find a way forward. Now, first note, there's something strange about the month of October in the mind of Francis. It's one of my favorite months, but he always holds synods in October. There might be a good or a traditional reason for this that I would consult church history, church tradition for, except for the fact that synods, in the sense that Francis used them, only began in Vatican II. It's an old term for meeting. It's a Greek term, but it was really re-weaponized and repurposed at Vatican II, that they're going to begin to use synods for this broad purpose of making changes. So October of 2014, we had the extraordinary synod on the family. And I was very keen to learn about this new pontificate then. Lots of funny business happened. In October 2014, halfway through, the relatio, the midterm report, included language that they wanted to list or adumbrate the positive elements of homosexual relationships. The African bishops and cardinals, God bless them, went crazy and forced this off the docket. They met again at the Ordinary Synod on the family in October again, 2015. And the rules this time were changing day to day. The African bishops and cardinals were complaining because we blocked what they wanted to do to make gay okay. At the last family synod, they're literally rewriting the rules, how synod voting works, how synod deliberation works every day. Guess what? It was so confusing, so labyrinthine, this process of moving the goalposts that the synod organizers were using, that even some of the St. Gallen Mafia types like Cardinal Casper were complaining that the process was inscrutable. So October 2014, extraordinary synod on the family. October of 2015, ordinary synod on the family. That led to Amoris Laetitia 6 months later in April 2016. And then we had the October synod, once again, always October, in 2019, when I was basically starting this channel. It was the Amazon synod, also took place in October. Lots of funny business with Pachamama, idol worship in the Vatican, Pachamama dunking. And the ostensible goal there, aside from making gay okay and making communion for the civilly divorced and remarried okay, which they did, which they successfully completed somehow after the 2014-2015 synods. 2019 was all about two separate goals. One was viri probati, making priests able to marry again, and secondly, women deacons and presumably female priests. And that was right at the beginning of COVID. By the time we got the post-synodal apostolic exhortation, again, it was an October debacle, as Francis always makes these October debacles, the synods. And he didn't include a footnote as he had before. He didn't use relatio to say things about gay relationships. This time, he used an attachment to the relatio. And there, that attachment affirmed that they were, even though they did not affirm it in the post-synodal apostolic exhortation, that came out much quicker than Amoris Laetitia did in 2015, 2016. Came out much quicker. And he did affirm that even though I didn't green light viri probati or women deacons, yet we're going to, basically is what he said. In the attachment, it's unusual to attach the relatio to the official post-synodal apostolic exhortation. He said this is an attachment, like an attachment to an email. For documentary purposes, this is actually part of the document. And that relatio had said, yes, it said more or less, we're probably going to press forward with women deacons and with married priests. Then COVID happened, right? So we had 3 October synods that were all catastrophic, that were all reforming. To get to that first theme of today's show, they were all about reform. They're all about reform according to a preset playbook, a trajectory set by the St. Gallen Mafia. And by my count, these 3 constituted the first 3 of 4 items on the St. Gallen Agenda's playbook, given to us in 2014, right at the beginning of this pontificate, by Cardinal Walter Brandmuller. one of the four dubia cardinals. He had said there are 4 items on the playbook for the Sankt Gallen Mafia. Remember, Francis is the Sankt Gallen Mafia Pope. He was placed there by these guys. You could get Julia Maloney's excellent book called Sankt Gallen Mafia, forward written by yours truly, to explain the details here. But Brandmuller said the first item on the agenda is a 30-year-old item that Cardinal Casper, one of the St. Gallen guys, has been pushing since 1983. Communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. Check. Green check here. The next 2 are very pro-body. How did Brandmuller know this? He's one of the good guys. Very pro-body, married priests, and female deacons and eventually priests. We have kind of a pause here, not a check or an X after the Amazon Synod of 2019. A pause. The relatio, which says they're going to do these things more or less, was attached to the final document. So pause. I lost a bet to Eric Sammons, right? I said I thought they were going forward in 2019, but COVID and other things, other items which reflected apathy or criticism, theme number 2 for today's show, by too much of the church, caused Pope Francis to pump the brakes. And he said, we'll tend to this later. Attach this relatio. Very unusual. And then also, according to Cardinal Walter Brandmuller back in 2014, he said that the 4th Sankt Gallen Mafia agenda item was intercommunion with Lutherans, with non-reverted Lutherans. We can have communion with Lutherans who remain Lutherans. As Catholics, that's a no-no. That would basically say Catholicism is Protestantism. So he's pushing forward the Sankt Gallen agenda. They were the kingmakers who gave us Francis. And the Synod has been the way. Several times, I count 10, he said, synodality is the way my pontificate will work. Synodality is the way that the church will work. Synodality is the way forward for the church. Synodality is the way to avoid apathy and criticism, theme number 2, from the right, to push through our far radical reform. Number 1, that's not a direct quote, but that's what he said in essence from the very beginning of his pontificate. Synodality. What is a synod for those who are still not quite sure? It's a meeting. It's not ecumenical. Not all of the world's bishops are there, but many of them are. And how they seem to work in the Francis pontificate is this. There is a preordained result that the powers that be, Francis and his Sankt Gallen Mafia cronies, I speculate, have set. They change the rules as much as they need to. They play kabuki theater at the synods. So they foment discussion. They lead it in this particular direction of affirming whatever agenda item they want. And even when you have the faithful African cardinals that throw roadblocks in the way, they ultimately get around it, as they did in the synods of 2014 and 2015. Cardinal Sarah and his fellow Africans and some of the South Americans got in the way, but we do now have Amoris Laetitia and communion for the divorced and civilly remarried. They're going to do this with very pro-body, with female deacons, and I think from all the propaganda we've seen, all the pictures and the paintings, I think they're going to do it with regard to the positive elements of same-sex relations as well, which was there in that first synod he ever held. Okay, so that's the groundwork. Francis, following the Vatican II playbook where they reintroduced synods, they repurposed them for radical change in the church, has used the synod quite effectively in almost 10 years of his pontificate now. In a couple of months, in 4 months by my count, he will have been Pope 10 years. He has successfully accomplished agenda item number 1. He's in the midst of accomplishing agenda items number 2 and 3, the ones that I listed earlier. The synodality synod is geared towards accomplishing numbers 2 and 3. And because To borrow Emperor Sidious's terms from Star Wars, he's a bit behind schedule. Actually, this is Darth Vader's term. Remember in Return of the Jedi? You're a bit behind schedule. The Emperor does not like this, and he is not as forgiving as Darth Vader. Now, I don't know who the Darth Vader and who the Sidious is in this analogy, but I know it's someone on Francis's side of the aisle that's calling the shots. Whether it's him or some power behind him, I don't know. But I do know that Francis's pontificate got a bit behind schedule, but he, unlike the Galactic Empire, has to worry about keeping up pretexts. You see? He has to keep the middle-of-the-road Catholics strung along. And I'm sorry to say it, but he's using the useful fools whom we love and who are good on most other issues, the Pope-splainers. He's using them to keep the fools strung along. And therefore, unlike the Galactic Empire, he has to go fast because it's radical reform that number 266 was emplaced to effectuate. But he can't go too fast. That's why he pumped the brakes at the Amazon Synod. That's why I lost that bet with Eric Sammons. Not because Francis isn't going to do this. No, the proof is in the pudding. He attached the relatio. He's mentioned from the time of the relatio and the final document at the Amazon Synod, he's mentioned female deacons and viri probati about a dozen times. It's been mentioned several times. It's one of the 4 goals. These 2 things are one of the 4 goals each for the Synodality Synod. Also at this Synodality Synod, they're, I think, planning to deal the death blow to the TLM, because that was also one of the 4 goals of this. I did a show on it right before I went on break. Consult that show if you're confused about this. At the end of September, by the way, this is all I said in that show. At the end of September, they're moving into the next phase of the Synodality Synod. The first phase was getting all the world's dioceses to they're hoping to hear from the liberal dioceses. They're hoping to hear what they wanted to hear from them, at least in a way where they could manipulate the results. They didn't hear enough from the leftist dioceses. This is what I'm reading in between the lines to conclude. They didn't hear enough from the liberal dioceses, and they probably heard a lot of criticism from the faithful dioceses. Remember the AP headline, after all. Pope extends reform process for year amid apathy and criticism. Okay, so you get how this works? Francis is pumping the brakes amid what was supposed to be a catch-up effort. He's a little bit behind schedule. He got that solid victory for the radical left that Cardinal Casper's been attempting since 1983, Amoris Laetitia. But items number 2 and 3 have been delayed over the last 3 years. The 3 years that I've been actively making videos on this channel began right, I think this channel, I put up my first video a day or 2 before or after the Amazon Synod concluded. I just jumped over from Taylor Marshall's channel, and Pachamama was fresh news. I just debated Trent Horn on feminism and the death penalty. Both issues. Thank you very much. John Paul II gave us basically the wrong Catholic point of view on both feminism and the death penalty. That 2-part debate with Trent. And I was starting my channel, October 2019. Well, since then, he's shown he has a fully compelling, strong, non-diminished interest in pushing St. Gallen agenda items 2 and 3, viri probati and women deacons. But he can't go too fast. Okay. Francis in 2021, I'm going to read a little more from this AP article. Francis in 2021 formally opened a 2-year consultation process on the topic of synodality. Synods on the topic of what are synods. That's very fishy. Or a more decentralized structure of the church with the laity having a greater role. I just add this really quickly. The most centralized structure of church power since the Second Vatican Council has been this pontificate. So why is he talking about decentralizing the structure of the church with the laity having a greater role? Pope Francis has ignored the laity who want the TLM. He has ignored the laity who want the reform of the reform, at least those who still like the Novus Ordo. They want Benedict's reform of the reform. He's ignored the faithful on, they want him to crack down on molesters in the church. He ignored them. Remember what he did in fall of 2018 after the Summer of Shame? He basically made it impossible for there to be real reform. He ignored the laity on some of the most popular faithful prelates. He's demoted, like Cardinal Burke, Bishop Athanasius Schneider. He's ignored the dubia, which was a popular outcry, a grassroots movement. And he, like the autocrat he is, the Peronist that he is from Buenos Aires, he's an outright tyrant. And he's been more tyrannical than Benedict. We wish Benedict was more tyrannical in effectuating the reform of the reform. That would have been good. But Benedict knew he wasn't going to go all the way for us. JP2, whole train wreck of a different sort. Paul VI, truckled, was a leftist that disappointed his leftist cohorts, but was still left of center. John the 23rd, open question there, the John Paul I. Francis is the most centralizing autocrat, gathering all power to himself in the church since Vatican II easily. Maybe in the 20th or 21st century period. But the point is, he's lying about the purpose of the Synod on synodality. The purpose is not decentralizing the structure of the church. He's doing the opposite. So what's the real reason? It's the radical change. I'll continue with this AP article. The process is part of Francis's long-term goal of making the church more inclusive, more participatory, and more responsive to real-world issues facing ordinary Catholics. Now, this is not a lie. This is not it uses a little bit of byplay, a little bit of code language, signs and symbols, as we Catholics call them. But this part's honest. Whereas the first thing the AP said about the Synod on synodality, that they're decentralizing church power, church structure under the Pope, lie. He's doing the opposite. He's done nothing but the opposite for 10 years. He is the most autocratic Pope of our lives. But making the church more inclusive, this means including mortal sin under the heading of virtue, finding the positive aspects of same-sex relationships, for example. He really wants to do that. More participatory, he really wants to make the church more participatory. He wants to give us something like an Amazonian rite, which will basically be Protestantism from the various things I've heard. He wants it to be more participatory for women who can never be priests, ontologically speaking. The bride is the church. She must have a bridegroom. A woman priest is liturgical lesbianism. Can't happen. But he definitely wants it to be more participatory for women and for folks that are essentially excommunicated, out of communion by way of their deeply, deeply offensive lifestyle. And he wants to respond to real-world issues facing, maybe not ordinary Catholics, even though that's the language, but real-world issues facing mortal sin-obsessed Catholics who refuse to get rid of their mortal sin. So that's the honest part. As part of the process, AP continues, the Vatican asked dioceses, religious orders, and other Catholic groups to embark on local listening sessions. So ordinary Catholics could talk about their needs and hopes for the church. What do you think this means? You think they're wishing upon a star that, I don't know, there'll be more holy days of obligation? You think they're wishing upon a star that we can return to early 20th century code of canon law?
You might want to read Bishop Tobin's tweet on that subject.
Listen to what Bishop Tobin said. Question: with the emphasis of walking together, circularity, listening sessions, frequent surveys, and fraternal dialogues, is our church becoming too introspective, too self-referential? Jesus told us to go forth to teach and serve, not sit around and talk about ourselves. Thank you, Bishop Tobin. Good Bishop Tobin, not Cardinal Tobin. Baby. Not Nighty Night Baby. So it's a thank you, Your Excellency. Listening sessions, why would you want to hear from the rank and file this much? They don't really. They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from even the cardinalate, the brotherhood of essentially court counselors for the Pope. That's what the cardinalate is. He won't listen to them. He never responded to their dubia. He wants to hear only from a certain group. This is a Caesarean trick. It's what demagogues use. Caesar would walk around the cities pretending to listen in listening sessions to the people. He'd throw them bread and he would promise them circuses. And he would enact policies that he was already going to do, long planned to effectuate. But he said, no, everyone sees me, right? You saw me with your own eyes. You saw me, I was walking the city, giving out some bread to some paupers and listening to what they needed for Rome to be great once again. It's a lie. He already knew what he was going to do. But this way, people could reference their own experience. They could say, I saw Caesar walking around. He's not lying about that part. It's simple kabuki theater. Bishop Tobin is right. They're not listening at the listening sessions, aside from to a foreordained group for a foreordained agenda. And we don't need that much listening anyway. We need leadership from the church. We have 2,000 years of doctrine, remember, people. Important point. Doctrine was far less clear 2,000 years ago because we hadn't had 21 ecumenical councils. They had more reason, more reasonable error, I should say, wired into the system at Nicaea. I'm so sick of people beating up on the early church. Nicaea, Ephesus, Constantinople, these first few councils had some ambiguity because they'd never before had ecumenical councils before Nicaea. It was the beginning of all the correction. The first 300 years of the church, remember, had no ecumenical councils because we could not exist as Christians out in daylight. Seed of the church is blood of the martyrs. So we only started having ecumenical councils 300 years in, and there was reasonable errors that had accrued in all the subterranean Christian churches over those 300 years without any course correction. So quit beating up Pope-splainers. Please quit beating up on, the Church of Nicaea, the Church of Ephesus. This is a much more messed up church than we are now. No, they had many more reasonable errors. Even in something basic like the Trinity, more reasonable reason, more extenuating circumstance to make errors at the beginning of it all. Now all that is set. There is 2,000 years along, 21 councils in. There is no reason to have basic doctrinal errors or reconfigurations. There are no errors. There are just reconfigurations by radicals like Francis. So they could talk about their needs and hopes for the church. He means SSA couples want to have their cake and eat it too. Want to be able to do the most deeply offensive thing, acts of SSA, and still get the communion. Acts of SSA and still go to heaven. You public fornicators, public adulterers, you want to be able to have a divorce? Contrary to what Jesus said, you're no longer allowed to have divorce. Moses allowed it for the hardness of the Israelite heart. But Christians don't have divorce. Want to be able to divorce your old wife or your old husband, trade your old wife in for the younger model, and still go to heaven, still get the Eucharist? Nope. Christian teaching is clear. You can't do that. That's what he means about hopes and needs of not the faithful, of the unfaithful for the church. Turn the faithful church into the unfaithful church, accommodate the unfaithful. Bishops' conferences in August reported back the results, and an organizing committee recently met near Rome and completed a synthesis document. This happened in late September, and I did my show on it 2 weeks ago. But several dioceses and bishops' conferences reported minimal participation. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, for example, the USCCB, our good friends, reported 700,000 people participated in the consultation in a country of 66.8 million Catholics. Well, that's still scientific, ain't it? Yeah, most people understand that this is a sham. This is a farce. So they didn't want to participate. There's nearly 1 million people. That's enough. So it's not the lack of interest. I can almost personally guarantee you, parish orphans and retrogrades, it's not the lack of interest. You had nearly 1 million respondents. Okay, there's 67 million Catholics. Most of what you're counting Catholics in America are not real Catholics. They don't go to church even. Many European countries also reported participation rates below 10%. 10% ain't bad. When I do a Twitter poll, I do not get respondents of anywhere near as high as 10%. When I do a YouTube poll, I don't get response rates anywhere near as high as 10%. The average view count of my average YouTube video, of which I do 3 per week, 3 YouTube vids, I get about 10% on the average video, maybe a little higher. But on polls, you don't get higher than 10%. In addition, many of Francis's opponents have scoffed at the entire initiative. Now, sure, that's me. Yeah. How do you scoff out loud? Huh, right? Yes. A leading critic and former Vatican official, Cardinal Gerhard Müller of Germany, recently warned that it represented a hostile takeover of the church. It does. They're trying to ruin the church, he told Raymond Arroyo. Others have pointed to a similar consultation process underway in Germany that has badly divided the church amid debate on hot-button issues such as sexual morality, women in leadership roles, and church's treatment of LGBTQ Catholics. You see the hyper-representation of that issue? Look, they just listed 3 issues. Sexual morality. Okay, that means SSA acts. Women in leadership role. I told you about that one. And then number 3, church's treatment of LGBTQ Catholics. What? What do you mean? You listed that twice. That's what they mean by sexual morality. So 2 of the 3 items are sexual morality, and also women's leadership roles. This is also a sexual morality question. What's wrong with the church's treatment of LGBTQ Catholics? Are they being burned at the stake? No. Are they being run out of church? No. Of the Mass on Sunday? No. Have they been invited in and invited to quit their sin? Yes. Okay. Shake the dust from your sandals. Like Jesus said, if they don't listen, shake the dust from your sandals. Treat them like a publican. What does Jesus say in Matthew chapter 18 with your brother? Go to him one-on-one, try to make up. If he won't hear you, bring 2 or 3 others along, try to make up. If he won't hear you, bring the church with you, means some sort of high representative where it becomes more public. And if he still won't hear you, be gone. That's life. You can't convert everyone. They're not trying to convert the LGBTQ Catholics. Announcing the year-long extension yesterday, Francis said the fruits of this first phase had been many, but in order to reach a full maturity, it's necessary that we not rush things. The second to last chapter in Julia Maloney's book, The Gallen Mafia, is called Patience and Time. They did 2 of the last 3 chapters. I forget what order. Patience and time. Now he's saying it's necessary that we not rush things. This guy knows what he's doing. Why would we not need to rush things? I told you, and I don't make these big predictions. A lot of other channels make big predictions and then have to walk them back. This is it. This synodality synod is after Amoris Laetitia, so the mask's off. It's after Pachamama. This is where he's trying to catch up all at once now on those 4 agenda items. And a 5th one, the SSA stuff. the LGBTQ stuff. That's a fifth unspoken one that Brandmuller didn't even mention. He's trying to catch up all at once. He's accomplished one item in 10 years. It was an ambitious one. Giving communion to adulterers. You can't even do that. But he's gotten it. He passed it under our noses. And the Pope-splainers are still Pope-splaining. The Pope-splainers, I was frustrated with good people, smart people, mostly faithful people at Catholic Answers in 2013, 14, 15 because they were slow to see. And then 16, 17, 18, everyone sort of woke up for a middle 3 years. And then 19, 20, 21, 22, they've gone back to sleep. Now they're basically all becoming where Peter is. I think classical theists said this. They're basically becoming where Peter is. The Pope-splainers are more asleep, more willfully blind now than they were slow to wake up in 13, 14, 15. Do you understand that? There's been a what do the leftists call it? Reactionaries. There's been a leftist reversion, reactionary response to the fact that everyone was awake late 2018 through 1920, maybe part of 21. Now they're just, the Pope-splainers they become insufferable. Francis is trying to drive the smoldering remains of the church into the ground as smoldering ruins. The church still stands now. What the hell is going to happen, parish orphans and retrogrades, if he says what he wants to say, what he's been biding his time with Julia Maloney described patience and time biding to do, which is seeing the positive effects, as all the German bishops, save a few, want to do, of SSA relationships, SSA acts. Positive? It's like saying, what are the positive aspects of Satanism? You can't do that. Women can be priests. The bride, the church, is led by a female bridegroom. Ecclesiastical lesbianism. Married priest, that's bad, not quite as catastrophic. At least that's sort of precedented, but it's bad, would have bad effects, which is what he wants. Intercommunion with Lutherans, we'd all be Protestants. Do you understand that? Catholics would be Protestants if we have intercommunion with Lutherans. So he's biding his time, not because of lack of participation. He's biding his time not because he's gotten some criticism. The answer to today's titular question is, Francis is biding his time because those like me in the church, those like Cardinal Mueller in the clergy, are still too strong a voice. He wasn't planning on being 10 years in and having strong, loud, clear, clarion voices opposing him. He thought the propagandists, we call the Pope-splainers, would have silenced not all, but more of the opposition to the Pope. And I don't know what, I never say recognize and resist, because we can't actively resist him, but just we can speak against it. I don't know what that is. It's not resisting, because it's not a real force. It's an imaginary Platonic force field or something. We can't resist the Pope, but we can talk about what he's doing being inconsistent with rectitude, inconsistent with recto ratio, inconsistent with church teaching, irreformable church teaching, adulterers, and that's what you are. I'm sorry. If you're divorced and remarried, it's adultery. Adulterers cannot receive the Eucharist. Adulterers cannot be part of, if they're unreformed adulterers, cannot go to the banquet in the sky. Whether it's literal or figurative, you can't have communion here or in heaven if you won't quit your sin, people. That's what this is all about. This is all about the loins and not having to quit your sin, having your cake, and eating it too to get into heaven. Announcing the year-long extension Sunday, Francis said the fruits of this first phase had been many, but in order to reach a full maturity, it's necessary that we not rush things. Adding in another year, he said, would allow for, quote, a more extended discernment. You know what discernment means? When you hear Francis saying discern, he means he's going to be, proverbially anyway, lying, cheating, begging, stealing, silencing opposition, anything behind the scenes. That's what he means by discerning. Dumb, holy fools fall for this shit. Dumb, holy fools fall for this shit. They literally say, oh, he said discern. He said fellowshipping. He said periphery. These are bad words inherently, but they're bad words out the mouth of Francis. Discernment doesn't mean holy. You don't have to bow to it just because he said. All he means is canvassing. Lying, cheating, stealing, begging, silencing, propagandizing. He needs another year. He's telling the people, the powers that made him king, you got to give me another year. That's what he's doing. I trust that this decision, he said, will lead to an understanding of synodality as a constitutive dimension of the church. Holy cow. Constitutive dimension of the church means an essential part of the substance of the church. I trust that this decision will lead to an understanding of synodality as a constitutive dimension of the church and to help everyone live it as a path of brothers and sisters who offer witness to the joy of the gospel. Francis said in his noon blessing yesterday overlooking St. Peter's. Well, now he's back to the anodyne language. It is joy of the gospel. What's the joy of the gospel, Pope Francis? The joy of the gospel is that even though we're sinners, actual sinners, we actually have done individual personal sin. And even though we are original sinners, we're stained by original sin, we can take care of both those types of sin. Baptism for the original sin, confession, as long as we promise never to do it again, for our actual sin. That's the good news, that we can go to heaven even though we screw up. That's the good news. That's the joy of the gospel. We're sinners, we're even mortal sinners, most of us, but we can still go to heaven. How? By quitting our sin and going to confession. Francis is talking about an anti-gospel, my friends. That's what this whole pontificate has stood for. The new good news, the false gospel, the anti-gospel is you can go to heaven without quitting your sin, particularly your icky sex sins. You don't have to come correct. That's what he means when he says the joy of the gospel. If you can't see this now, by the way, give up. You're hopeless. If you can't see after 10 years nearly of Francis that this is all about an anti-gospel, defining the quote-unquote joy of the gospel is the fact that we can go to heaven without quitting our sins. If you can't see that that's Francis's message, then you're lost. That's what I have to say to the Pope's splainers at this point. Already, the Vatican's office organizing the meeting had extended by several months the deadline to let ordinary dioceses and bishops' conferences report back. There's already an extension. That office said Sunday the decision to extend the whole process by another year would, quote, foster more mature reflection for the greater good of the church. What makes them so confident? They're lying about why they're doing this. What makes them so confident? You already had extensions. You're just stalling. You know, Francis, that there are too many faithful Catholics that, I don't want to say resist, because I don't like that. That's not the appropriate denotation. It's not the appropriate definition or verb to describe the sort of pushback you're getting. You are this sovereign. It's mysterious, the sovereignty of the Pope over the church. It's not that we're resisting you. It's that we're speaking out. We're pre-sponding, right? We're pre-responding. We're giving preliminary responses anticipating the evils that you are going to spearhead. And that's been a more powerful force of pre-response. Not resisting. Pre-response. And it will, whatever the narrow quorum, the hard fought for minority majority that you were going for, it's being disrupted by voices like mine, stronger and louder than mine, particularly the clerics, like the ex-prefect for the CDF, Cardinal Gerhard Muller. He said it to Raymond Arroyo, folks. I want to hear Pope-splainers Pope-splain that. The former CDF, who's not a radical conservative, said, if the people who are running this synod, that means Francis, he just wants to be careful, the people running the synod get their way, they will destroy the church.
He's an inside guy and he's saying it.
This is the ultimate inside guy. The number one doctrinal inside guy saying this.
People are asking what's wrong with resisting.
Words have definitions. You're not resisting. It's not that it's wrong to do. It's that you can't do it and you haven't done it. It's imaginary, right? Someone asked me on Twitter the other day, Tim, why are you afraid of strong women? I said, I'm not. I'm just, to be the boy in the Emperor's New Clothes that said, look, you're deluded. You're deluded if you think that the Emperor has new clothes. If you ask that boy, why are you threatened by his new clothes? I'm not threatened by the Emperor's new clothes. Strong women, I said, I've never met a woman that could bench press 200 pounds. That's not even much. I've never met one. So I said, you're deluded. I'm not threatened. In a nicer way now, because I'm speaking to feminists then, but in a nicer way, you're not resisting the Pope, okay? You can't. He's a sovereign. We could throw up truth bombs and throw them up loudly enough. His whole goal, Francis's, has been to get around the truth smoke screens. And somehow, by the grace of God, lots of us have been able to throw up enough that he's uncomfortable doing what he wants to do. He's uncomfortable doing what he wants to do. If he wanted to push ahead the way he did with communion for the public adulterers in April 2016, he could, and we couldn't go resist him. Resisting means you storm the Vatican. You stop the printing presses from running. But don't do that. You can't do that. Resistance means violence, justified or unjustified. We can't do any kind of violence. So it's just the wrong imagery. It's delusional imagery. It's throw up a prayer, throw out truth bombs, and see what happens. I can't resist the way that the men of 76 did in this country, like Jefferson and Adams. That's resisting. Okay? That's why I object to the language. Not because it's threatening, not because it's slightly imperfect, but because it's badly delusional. The final paragraph of this AP article goes like this. It's not the first time that Francis has split a synod meeting up into two sessions with a year breathing room between them. He did that for his synod on the family, which took place over the course of two sessions in 2014, 2015. I forgot he got to this. And resulted in his 2016 document. I didn't know that it concluded this way. That opened the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion. Can I reread this last sentence?
Please.
Listen to this.
Please do.
Listen to me, Steph. Think of this. This is the AP. These are not Catholics. They probably don't know what the four marks of the church are. They don't know what the precepts of the church are. They don't understand the difference between the virgin birth and the immaculate conception. They don't know the basics. They couldn't pass my Baltimore catechism class. We'll be live with that again tomorrow afternoon, of course. And look what they get that the Pope-splainers don't. Look at the last sentence. They read the writing on the wall. Francis did that. By did that, they're indexing to split up a synod. And they understand why he did too, it sounds like. He did that for his synod on the family, which took place over the course of two sessions in 2014 and 2015, and resulted in his 2016 document that opened the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion. Why am I troubling over this? Because all the Pope-splainers out there still haven't accepted that this happened. Do you understand? I know a lot of you guys watch a lot of other channels. If you watch a channel that doesn't even accept that Francis split up the 2014 Extraordinary Family Synod and the 2015 Ordinary Family Synod, concluding 6 months later in the 2016 document, Amoris Laetitia, that opened the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion, then you shouldn't trust that source. That's in the history books. There's a green check mark on that first of 4 Sankt Gallen agenda items. Why am I shaking my fist at the sky? Because there's still lots of Pope-splainers that say that didn't even happen. Do you know how crazy that is? Do you know how crazy it is that, like, it would be like if our enemies said, well, we didn't lose the Battle of Lepanto. We just didn't. We're still holding strong against the Catholics. We won the battle against the Catholics at Lepanto. You just be like, what is wrong with you? I'm serious. Pope-splainers, are you delusional? What is wrong with you? The Associated Press gets a fact. Wake up. Francis split up synods, bowed his time a little bit in 2014, 2015, stretched it out even into the year of 2016, Amoris Laetitia, to open the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion. This is the central act so far of the Francis pontificate. What I want all of you to do, every parish orphan and retrograde out there, if you watch other channels, then ask them, did Francis split up synods in 2014, 2015, resulting in a 2016 document that opened the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion? If they say no, you got to pump the brakes. Do you understand? This is basic. I know. Look, I'm not a rad trad. I understand that the Pope is the Pope and that we have to be careful about things. But this is a fact. This is like, the rain in Spain stays mainly on the plain, and it did so 2 days ago. We had rain in Spain on the plains. It was an event. It happened 2 days ago on October the 15th. It was a rain event. It lasted 3 hours. You still have people out there that was like, no, it was sunny. The Battle of Lepanto was not given to the Catholics, seemingly by heaven. No, our opponents won the Battle of Lepanto. The Allies did not prevail in World War II or World War I. It wasn't the Allies. It was the Axis. What? What are you talking about, man? I'm sick of it. Okay? Deal with reality. We can argue about what's going to happen in the future, even if it's pretty clear what probably will. I'll deal with any Catholic out there with a YouTube channel that says, no, I don't think that's going to happen, even though it kind of looks like it's going to. Cool. We're cool. Don't say that 2014, 2015 didn't yield a 2016 document that opened the door to letting divorced and civilly remarried Catholics receive communion. That's just what happened. And the channels out there that Pope-splain can't deal with it, so they lie. It's not acceptable. There will be a way forward, parish orphans and retrogrades. This channel is all about it. The way forward is CMask. I'm doing more of these shows on CMask, Christian masculinism. A weekly podcast. It's not always on this channel. Me and my bros shift which channel it's going to be on, but that's the way forward. The clergy is doing nothing for us. The way forward is how can we save the church from within the laity? We can save our families. That's all we can do. We can't guarantee that the Latin Mass will always be with us. And I'm a Latin Mass supremacist. I think the Novus Ordo will go away, but I think it's going to take another couple generations. We can't do that, though. That's not a laity thing. We can't guarantee that the bishops aren't all a little bit on the effeminate side of things. Yeah, but BUT philosophers. They say sodomy is wrong, but it's just too good to be dispensed with. We can't tell the priests to give good homilies. We can't do any of that. But what we can do is the men lead families. Christian masculinism needs to be the way forward. That's the only thing we can control. People that say that we can resist the Pope or make the Pope do this or that, it's just not true. But what we can do against the Pope-splainers is tell the truth about what the Pope is doing. Like 1 Peter 5 did in 2014, 2015, 2016. I was working in the law in 2014. And man, I'll forever love Steve Skojec for having such a great blog. The one that was detailing early in the Francis pontificate how bad, evil Francis was. Every day he had inside reports. And I'll always be grateful to Steve Skojec for that. There's a way forward, but we got to be honest about this. We can't Pope-splain. God bless you all. Deus Volt. Sign up for Patreon today, and you can join our first viewing club, Stranger Things Season 1 on Friday. Deus Volt.